Hi, welcome to your strategy room. Today I'm going to introduce my EVG framework, Entrepreneurial Value Generation Framework, to you. I know I've been talking about our fight against entropy, but what does it mean and how do we apply our fight against entropy with our strategic management within our organization? And that's what the EVG framework is all about. If you haven't seen my videos about our fight against entropy, you can either refer to my book or go to osmanköksal.com, and then I compiled a completely free course for you where you can follow the video formatted the sequence that's going to explain our fight against entropy and some of the key definitions that I laid out both in my book and in my YouTube videos. They're going to be extremely easy for you to follow and then set the foundation for what I'm going to be talking about going forward. Our organizational fight against entropy, in its roots, it's no different than the individual fight against entropies that we engage in. But organizational fight against entropy directly impacts into our strategic management aspect. And we don't consider us as an individual anymore. We treat the organization, our organization, as an entire system, a little bit more complex system because of its internal resources, people, machinery, processes, procedures, inputs, outputs. It's a little bit more complex system. But the general idea from strategy point of view, it is absolutely no different that we are turning a useful and compact energy into its useless form while we're generating value. EVG framework sets the value generation and the value itself based on its fight against entropy definition at the center of our attention and also at the center of our strategic formulation and within our strategic management. EVG framework approaches our strategic management from two point of views, two different point of views, and brings them over to one page. So the first approach is the top-down, and the second approach is bottom-up. So the top-down approach of EVG framework starts with identifying our three key stakeholders. Now, the number of key stakeholders could be increased depending on the needs of your organization. But the framework includes the bare minimum three key stakeholders. And they are your target customers, your own organization, and your equity owners or investors. So these three key stakeholders, they are looking for strategic outcomes that are based on value generation. So the first approach, the top-down approach of EVG framework starts with these three key stakeholders. And what we do is we lay out the outcomes that we as organization have to deliver for these three key stakeholders. But some of these outcomes could be shared among these three stakeholders, or they may be exclusive, or some of them could be shared with some or the other. One or the other, we have to lay out these outcomes. Now, one step further, in order to come up with these outcomes, we first have to look at the fight against entropy of these key stakeholders. So we start with the fight against entropy of our customers and fight against entropy of our own firm and then fight against entropy of our investors. So once we understand these type of dynamics, then we translate them into the outcomes, the strategic outcomes in the short term or in the long term for ourselves, for our organization. And then we plot them onto one page on the EVG frameworks. So these valuable future outcomes of our corporate goals and strategies are laid out here in terms of OKR and KPIs. Bottom-up approach of the EVG framework starts specifically with our organization's fight against entropy. When we looked at how we as individuals or as any other systems are concerned, how we fight against entropy is by value exploration, value formation, and value maintenance. And we had to do all of these uh, and become tridexterous, and we have to do all of these simultaneously. So the bottom-up approach of the EVG framework starts with our day-to-day activities. So those activities can be classified one or two or three of these compilation of activities are value generation activities, so to speak, within the value exploration, value formation, and value maintenance. So in summary, if we were to visualize the bottom-up approach of the EVG framework, we have value exploration, we have value formation, and we have value maintenance. In my previous videos, we went into great detail of how what they are and how they work. And all of these activities that requires us to be tridexterous. And tridexterity is our capability, our ability to do all these three activities in our day-to-day life, day-to-day activities within our organization simultaneously. Us as an organization, we cannot focus on too much on value exploration and ignore value formation, or focus too much on value formation and ignore value maintenance. We have to do all these three simultaneously. Yes, one could be in a short period of time can be prioritized over the other, but at the end of the day, we must be tridexterous. And in my previous video, I also explained the role of our revenue generators, not only in our fight against entropy, but our customers' fight against entropy, our end users' fight against entropy. Here, with the EVG framework, we are connecting our uh, internal activities, internal tridexterous activities, with the fight against entropy of our customers and our end users. Hence, we are carrying their needs and wants into our organization, into our day-to-day activities. So once we have the top-down approach and then the bottom-up approach, EVG framework allows us to align and close the gap between these two activities. We are literally putting our day-to-day activities with our strategic outcomes that oftentimes a lot of the organizations cannot connect the dots. So EVG framework allows us to make this alignment very easily, and it makes it very visual for us. So the bottom-up approach, we have value exploration, value formation, and value maintenance, our tridexterous activities. And then we have the top-down approach, where we take the EVG entrepreneur value generation for all these key stakeholders. Now, I call the bottom-up approach an emergent strategies, and then top-down approach is the proactive strategies. It's primarily because if you were a new startup, and particularly some of the well-established manufacturing organizations today, when they were first started 20, 30, maybe 40 years ago, they didn't lay out the foundation for the strategies. They literally started their operations and then things just evolved the way they did. In other words, their daily operations drove their strategic formulations. So those type of strategic outcomes, they emerged from the day-to-day activities. So we can think of our bottom-up approach as the emergent strategies. Top-down approach, on the other hand, is something typically private equity or holding company or a venture capitalist model, where when we look at a venture, we have to lay out the strategies before we get into the operations. So in other words, we have to think proactively in the next 3, 5, and 7 years at the lifespan of our investment. So in other words, somehow we have to find a balance between the emergent way, because it's a lot more organic. That's the way typically our target market loves. But at the same time, we need the vision and the mission and the feature and proactive involvement of our strategic management and the value form and the value generation formulation. So in other words, EVG framework allows us to bring all these two worlds together very simplistically on one page. So this is the very basic foundation for the EVG framework that I was able to develop after finalizing the concept of our fight against entropy. It answers the question how we can practically approach and generate value with the knowing that how our key stakeholders and including our own organization are fighting against entropy. You may have tons of questions and comments. Make sure to join my YouTube community and join the conversation there. Also, please subscribe to my channel, because I'll be making more videos. Don't miss them, and look forward for my next video.